My name is Heikki Mäki. I come from Ericsson Product Security and I'm going to talk about threat modeling. What is threat modeling, why you should do it, and a little bit of how you can do it. So let's start about some basics. Like, what is a threat? So threat is that something negative could happen, and that negative is something that we don't want to happen. So how to find out about those things? Threat modeling is an activity how you can find out those things in advance, and especially when we want to find out about security flaws in a software. So what are security flaws? Security flaws are usually design level mistakes that can be there even if there is no mistake in the code, but there can still be problems. So we want to find out those things before they basically happen. So you may think that threat modeling is awful hard, but actually all of us are doing that in our daily lives. Like, think about buying a used car. So when you go to a car dealer, do you just buy the car that the dealer shows you first? Or would you rather think about, like, what's the mileage? Has there been any big repairs ahead? Has the car been crashed? Or do you trust the dealer? Then what about driving a car? Like, if you want to leave somewhere, when you should leave, which route to take, what's the traffic, the weather condition, should you overtake when there's a two-lane road or something like that. So we are doing these things basically in our daily lives. So how to apply that in software? So it turns out that there are ways to do that. So first of all, we should understand what are we building, and then what bad can happen in that, and what are we going to do about those things. So let's have a look on those things. So first of all, what are we building? So we need to know and sort of analyze the composition of the system. What's under the hood? What are the main components? What are the assets? Assets are things that are valuable to us. So what are those in our system? What are the data flows? Who's processing the data? Where does it go? And then external dependencies, like interfaces we are opening, who can use them, and so on. Also, who do we trust and who do we not trust? So then about what can go wrong. So this is where it gets interesting. So knowing the system at high level lets us to examine those things that can go wrong. So what we want to do here is basically consider the environment where the software will be operating, the attack surfaces that it has, for example, interfaces, the inputs, accesses we are providing. The threat actors, basically those persons or stakeholders that might want to misuse the system and what motives they might have. So then identifying the threats and considering the controls we already have, basically finding out what are we lacking. So, okay, that may sound like a good idea, but how do we actually do that in practice? And that's where we can look at the different methodologies that can come at help. So when we want to do it systematically, we can apply some methodologies, and here are some of them. Stride is maybe the most known methodology and the most mature one, developed by Microsoft some 20 years ago. So it works so that we basically model the system in data flows and trust boundaries, and basically find out threats in different categories, like spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. Then there's another methodology called attack trees, which basically are hierarchical diagrams where you basically find out how an asset might be attacked in a series of attacks, where the attacker advances to the next level and ultimately reaches the goal. Then there's a methodology called persona non grata, which focuses on motivations and skills of a human attacker, characterizing users as archetypes who could misuse the system. This is a bit like adversarial type of agile personas. We can also gamify threat modeling. There are different ways, like you can play a card game called Elevation of Privilege, which is basically the Stride as a group game. So then, what are the different threat libraries that you might want to use? The very known OWASP Top 10 is one of them. It lists the 10 most critical web application security risks. Then there's common weakness enumeration and common attack pattern enumeration and classification, which can come handy. So, when we have identified some threats, we need to decide what are we going to do about them. So first we want to analyze what is the risk that relates to the threats. So usually we do it by basically identifying what's the probability, like what are the chances that the threat can occur, and then the impact, that what could happen if the threat occurs. So this can be done as a heat map, basically where the red is the high risk and the green is the low risk. So this helps us identify and prioritize the risks, because not all risks are equal. So then when we have done that, we can basically decide what are we going to do. So we can fix the risk, or we can apply defense in depth, or focus other assurance activities like fuzz testing on an external interface. Or we can also accept the risk. Usually that can be done if the risk is low. So then when to threat model? First of all, we should do it early so that we have time to fix the things as well. Also, whenever we bring some new things into the system, because new things basically introduce new threats. And also when we change something, so because if we change something in the system, the assumptions that we have made are also changing, and the judgments we have made on earlier risks. So we should revisit the earlier risks and basically see what are the new things that we have to take into account. So that summarizes my presentation on threat modeling. I hope you enjoyed it.